Everyone, have we got people here? It's got 16 participants. It's going up a bit. Should we just give it a minute? We'll get going in just a second. Still looks like there's people joining at the moment. But we've got quite a packed program. Okay. It's a couple of minutes past 10, so probably we need to kick off. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar on delivering transport decarbonisation. I'm Daniel Hobbs, Head of Integrated Transport Delivery for Connected Places Catapult, the UK's innovation accelerator for transport and place. Transport's now about a third of the UK's carbon emissions, and it's an area where we need new ideas and to really share the successes and learn from each other. So different modes have got their different challenges as well as opportunities to learn from each other, and really hopefully this is an opportunity to do some of that sharing. Innovation to tackle those hard to decarbonise elements of the transport system are a core part of our strategy at Connected Places Catapults, for example, through our work as part of the Hydrogen Innovation Initiative and on the zero emission heavy goods vehicles. So I'm really excited to hear from our speakers today who bring a range of perspectives to the challenges and new technologies that are coming into this arena. We've got Natalie Rees from Transport for Wales, we've got Rob Place from First Bus, Ben Warren from RSSB, Duncan McCourt from Sustainable Aviation. We have about 10 minutes each from them, and then we've got some time for questions and discussion at the end. So please get your questions ready. If you put them in the Q&A function as we go at the bottom of the screen, and we will come to them at that end. Okay. Got ready to go. Over to you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, hi everyone. I'm Rob. As explained, I work for First Bus as their decarbonisation program manager. I've only been in the post for a few months now, but I am excited to be representing First Bus and I think on this call, especially the bus industry as a whole. And I feel like events like this will help break down some of the barriers and challenges we've got associated with decarbonisation at the moment. As well as hopefully show you how some of these challenges can be made into opportunities, potentially not just for our sector, but for other sectors as well. To give you a bit of an overview on the challenges we at First Bus as an organisation have faced, roughly say 10 years plus ago, we had a fleet of around 4,000 vehicles, all of which were diesel guzzling buses, as they have been for many years beforehand. I'm sure you can picture the stereotypical bus driver and bus driving through a town centre with a black cloud of smog pumping out of the tailpipes. So not really the best optics for decarbonisation. And I suppose that's where the challenge really began. How do we improve our approach and performance in an industry that has remained largely the same for so many years before? And it's not as easy as it sounds. I'm pleased to say that over the following years, though, within the business and within government especially, considerable focus and investment has been put into how we can make improvements to our fleet, as well as to the customer journeys as a whole, and whether there may be, as I say, other opportunities we could exploit at the same time. So what have been our key milestones or breakthroughs on our decarbonisation programme so far? Well, we've achieved some incredible milestones over the past few years, and it's really exciting to actually see the progress, especially to someone new to the bus industry as I've been. We now have 1,250 zero-emission buses or ZEVs on the road out of our current total fleet of about 5,500, with a confirmed pipeline of projects that will take us to over 1,500 ZEV buses by next year. This keeps us really well on track for our sort of public goal of running a zero-emission commercial fleet by 2035. We've also successfully transitioned 3 depots, one in York, one in Norwich, and one in Leicester, to become full EV, with Bristol soon to follow. In a pioneering move for the industry. We've also launched a diesel sort of repowering program with more than 30 sort of repowered electric buses already on the road and dozens more to follow. For those of you not in the know, a repower bus is basically repurposing an existing diesel bus, which still has some life left in it, removing the engine, the peripherals, etc., and adding an EV drivetrain and batteries instead. The financial savings on one of these buses in comparison to the new bus can be around, say, about 50% versus new. And we're also obviously recycling a bus that may have well been scrapped in a few years' time. So it's been well worth investing, exploring and supporting this new technology as it moves forward. We also launched First Charge this summer, which is a name we've given for our long-standing initiative to share our charging infrastructure with organisations. Initially, just business to business, working alongside EHGV and coach users. However, we have ambitions of launching sites that are sort of bus to customer, or business to customer, sorry, as well. So, watch this space. Looking ahead, we're also introducing battery storage projects in our Portsmouth and Aberdeen areas, which will not only support the grid, which is fantastic, but will also serve as a great trial for giving our bus batteries a second life. And another key area for us is leveraging our existing partnerships with OEMs, technology providers, local authorities, just to support our goal of zero emissions deployment. Partnerships are absolutely critical to our success. We can't do this alone, we understand that, so we're collaborating with a wide range of organisations and really trying to blaze a trail within the bus industry and broader transport industry as well. We understandably work close with vehicle manufacturers like Brightbus, Yutong, ADL to get the zero emission buses we need. But a big part of our success also comes from a collaboration with technology providers such as Heliox, Hitachi, and Greenroad. Heliox have been key in developing our charging infrastructure, including our overhead gantry system. This system saves space and provides our depot staff with super easy to use charging solution. Hitachi have helped unlock the data behind our routes, buses, batteries, and charging infrastructure, helping those manage the operations to keep the fleet optimized and organized. And finally, I suppose Greenroad, which is a cloud-based telematics provider. They give us an insight into the key fleet performance indicators, so we know how well the buses are being driven, the speed, the camber, the pull-away performance, braking zones, all of which really help our staff understand and improve the sort of broader passenger proposition and their relationships on a day-to-day basis. Finally, none of this would be possible without our partnerships with local authorities across the UK, and the Department for Transport and Transport Scotland have been key in that. Their partial funding through schemes like ZEBRA, which is the Zero Emissions Bus Regional Area, grants have been essential for us getting our projects off the ground. In terms of key challenges, I suppose getting the kit we need, like transformers and feeder pillars, on time can be a hurdle sometimes, and of course, power upgrades. People often think about the buses first and trying to get them on order, but the real order should really be sort out the power, then the charging, refueling setup, and then finally the vehicles come at the end. To get ahead of it, we've started engaging with DNOs much earlier. Even for depots where we don't have immediate electrification plans, we're getting in there as soon as we can. The earlier we can understand the power availability, and more importantly, the challenges we may have to face, like miles and miles of cabling to connect us to the grid, along with the associated sort of digging headaches and increasing infra costs, the better. The biggest lesson we've learned is that it's not just about the buses, it's about the entire depot ecosystem, and bringing all our people along on the journey, from drivers to engineers to customers. To get to zero emission, you have to look at everything from charging tech, power supply, and even things like heating systems, on-site solar panels, and how people's roles change and how they need to interact with the new system. It's a complete transformation, especially for a sector like buses, where there's a lot of legacy associated with it. So what's next for us? The next phase for First Bus is all about being smarter and more collaborative. We'll continue to focus on the repowering of diesel buses into electric vehicles, which is a great way to extend the life of our assets, and reduce emissions with less manufacturing carbon. We also see huge opportunities in growing first and sharing our charging infrastructure with other companies and members of the public. And we'll continue to work closely with local authorities and partners on joint projects, because we really see this collaborative effort as being core to our future. The journey is evolving. from just getting new electric buses to creating a truly integrated, smart and sustainable transport network for all. And I, for one, coming new to the industry, am really proud but excited to be part of it. And I think that's it from me. I've kind of done about 7 minutes, so if you want to take the next 3 minutes to chill out, you're more than welcome. Or Natalie, if you'd like to jump in, you're more than welcome to do that.
If I just jump in with a quick question.
By all means, sir.
You're talking about the depot ecosystem and changing the way people are thinking about it. Has that included a lot of training for the mechanical bus maintenance team as well? How have they addressed that?
Yeah, so the engineering teams have been the ones that have been hit the hardest, I suppose. You know, the vision of a diesel fleet depot is very much sleeves rolled up, oil and bits and pieces, mechanics everywhere. You know, it's been the improvement that we've seen from moving to EV buses is it's more like a Formula One garage. You know, you're expecting people to walk around in white coats now because it's so easy to maintain and look after these vehicles. But what we've done as an organisation is we've tried to maximize those individuals, and we're now in-housing some of our support for things like the units that we actually use, the charging units. So they now do that in-housing support and annual maintenance, and so that preventative maintenance element. So the jobs that we had for those individuals, culturally, mentally, it takes a big change to take someone from the legacy use that they've had and this understanding of their business. And I'll be honest, coming into the bit, I think I've been with the business about 6 months now. When I reached out to people to be introduced to them, there are people that are saying, "Oh yeah, there's someone that's been there very short term, and they've been in the industry for 10 years. There's someone recently that just left the organization that have been in it for 50, and I think most people are sort of in that tail end. So there is this real they're used to how it goes. There's a real pattern to that. So trying to change the mindset, trying to make everybody feel comfortable with the changes and this transition that we're doing within the journey has been a real key consideration, I think, for the business. And we've managed it pretty well. We try and be very transparent with what we're doing and bring people on board. But it's a huge change to change the focus and the structure of a day-to-day operating bus depot from a very mucky garage environment to a now more clinical piece. But we're able to utilize and maximize the opportunities within there for people to still have jobs, for people to still enjoy what they're doing, and for people to still feel like they're on the journey with the buses, which they've been doing for many, many years.
That's great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Really good kickoff. Thanks, Rob. Natalie Rees, are you ready to go next? Natalie is the Head of Sustainable Development and Climate Change at Transport for Wales.
Oh, thank you. So yes, I've been at Transport for Wales now for just over 6 years. And Transport for Wales was set up in 2018, so I'm a relatively old timer in terms of Transport for Wales. So over the past 6 years, Transport for Wales has invested £800 million in the electrification of around 170 kilometres of railway track for the South East Wales Metro. And really the electrification of these lines is a big part of the decarbonisation journey for Transport for Wales. Since 2023, we've been introducing brand new trains. We've introduced 4 trains with a 5th to follow. Our Class 197 train, which is our long distance units, were built very locally to us in Newport. The work on the electrification hasn't been a straight line, in that we've constantly reviewed what we've been doing with the electrification. So as part of that, we've been able to provide a discontinuous electrification where at points the trains will convert back to battery and then pick up a charge later on down the track. And that really has also offered us the opportunity to reduce emissions. It's also offered us the opportunity to extend the journey times of the trains, so that they're where we thought we may need to use diesel for part of the journey, we haven't had to do that. Over 50% of journeys now in Wales are on over 50% of our brand new trains are now currently in service, with more being introduced all the time. 2/3 of passenger journeys are now on new and improved trains, and this is a brilliant turnaround from what was, very old rolling stock in Wales. The passenger journey has improved significantly, and that's where we're having the most impact. Our passenger numbers have increased. Modal shift is where Transport for Wales can make the most difference in terms of reducing emissions. So it's getting passengers out of their single-use private vehicles and onto public transport, whether that's bus, which we're also taking more responsibility for, or the railway. We also work on active travel and electric vehicles as well. We helped to produce the Welsh electric vehicle charging strategy, and we introduced 21 rapid EV charge points into very rural areas in Wales to help with that integrated transport model. We're now working on future opportunities, including Network North Wales. We're working on projects in hydrogen bus and decarbonisation of the wider bus fleet. The Welsh Government have recently produced the future of bus operations in Wales and bill. In terms of innovation, we look at our operations not only from the point of our moving carbon emissions, as we call them, but also our non-moving emissions. And we have assets such as railway shelters, where we can take opportunities to even decarbonise those. So we've been working with Specific, which are an arm of Swansea University, to develop a completely off-grid shelter. And this idea at first looked at the opportunity to power lighting and sort of passenger information signs. But actually, the thin film solar that we deployed to the roofs of these shelters was more powerful than we expected, enabling us to power CCTV, potentially water features for green roofs on shelters, and advertising as well. So that's been a really exciting project to be part of, and these almost little power stations could potentially in the future feed back into the grid or into local energy generation. We also worked with an organisation called Riding Sunbeams, who've done a lot of work in England on trackside renewables, to look at the opportunity for powering our electric cables through local energy generation. And that's not just energy that we could produce, but potentially community energy opportunities or other private energy opportunities within the South East Wales valleys. The timing of the projects at the time didn't quite match up, but this sort of new technology is going to be trialled in Bristol shortly, and that gives us a little window of opportunity to pick it back up and have a look at how we could retrofit that energy requirement. And of course, in the past 6 years, energy prices have increased significantly, and it gives us a lot of opportunity to sell this, which is quite an innovative idea in quite a sort of, I wouldn't say old-fashioned environment, but it's, very risk averse in the railway. There's a lot of safety restrictions around the railway environment, and so introducing something new is always going to take some time. But yeah, really excited about the opportunity for trackside renewables in the future. We're also focusing on energy efficiency. We have a lot of old buildings in Wales that have sort of listed building status, and looking at the opportunity for retrofitting even slate roof tiles, or solar panels that look like slate roof tiles to buildings. So there's lots of opportunities for decarbonisation, going from the very big opportunities like electrifying the lines to the much smaller, more local opportunities. And I think I'll stop talking there.
Great, thanks. That's a quick rundown of a huge number of things that are happening, Natalie. And just one question that occurred before we move on. You were talking about connecting EV charging stations in rural areas. Do you find the challenge of getting the power connection for those sort of charges at those locations then?
So with the locations that were chosen, no, but there are areas where in the future there could be challenges that arise. There are very local, very rural areas in Wales, and that will be improving or not working with National Grid, for example, to look at opportunities. We've looked at opportunities for mass battery storage in some very rural areas to help with local charging, especially where there are opportunities for local energy production. It's battery technology is improving so quickly. When we initially looked at it, it would mean filling shipping containers with batteries that were potentially sort of buried underground. But as battery technology is improving, it gives us the opportunity to look at that as an option for those rural areas.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. And as to remind everyone, keep putting the questions in and we'll come to them all at the end. Okay, Ben, over to you as the emissions principal from RSSB.
Thank you very much. Maxine, you bring up the slide pack, please. Yeah, so I'm the emissions principal at the RSSB. For anyone that doesn't know what the Rail Safety and Standards Board are, we are a member-funded organisation that was developed to deal with safety and standards across rail. I'm part of the sustainability team, and we provide research and guidance for the industry. If you can go to the next slide, please. So we have the industry-wide sustainability strategy is called the Sustainable Rail Blueprint that we brought together with the industry. I'm responsible for the work on the 3 emissions topics that are in the middle there, which is a quieter railway, net zero carbon rail, and clean air. The next slide, please. If anyone's interested, please have a look at the Sustainable Rail Blueprint, but it has it describes the rail industry and which parts of the industry are responsible for different measures, and it includes 6 common solutions in the how section, of which I'll cover today: the zero emission traction and seamless journeys, which I think are particularly relevant to decarbonisation. So next slide, please. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of 3 different topics that we're dealing with at the moment: traction decarbonisation, infrastructure decarbonisation, and the ways that we can work with other modes of transport to decarbonise transport in general. Next slide, please. And the next one. One thing so I've been in the RSSB for 2 years. One thing I wasn't really aware of before I joined is how many diesel trains there are still. I think 39% of the rail network is electrified, so there are still lots of diesel trains around, 29% of vehicles, but because of the emissions associated with diesel, the traction emissions, the majority are from diesel traction, which means, as Natalie talked about, the electrification is the best solution for decarbonising railway. Because of the costs of electrification, there's the current idea across the industry is, as our friends at the Railway Industry Association call it, the plan of thirds, with electrifying another third of the network and using battery electric multiple units to for other lines that where there is discontinuous electrification that Natalie talked about. Next slide, please. At the moment, there are trains. There are discussions around replacements for diesel without, as we wait for the procurement for battery trains. HVO, hydro-treated vegetable oil, is used by some passenger and freight trains around the network at the moment. Not being a fossil fuel, it has significant carbon savings. But this is where rail is in a wider transport infrastructure alongside aviation. I think this is, Duncan will come on to this more, but the feedstocks for HVO that is used at the moment are going to be a key part of sustainable aviation fuel supply. So there may be competition with rail, and one of the government viewpoints is that rail is easier to decarbonise than aviation because we do have batteries that could be used in trains, and we do have electrification. So we did this project on low carbon fuels, looking at the different options for HVO, synthetic fuels, ammonia and hydrogen. HVO is used at the moment, so it's in the near term there, it's a sort of green, but the supply is going to become more constrained as other modes need it. The rest of the fuels we found are the rail industry needs to monitor their commercialization, really, because there needs to be development of those engines to use those other types of fuels. So at the moment, batteries are definitely seen as the if we go on to the next slide, batteries are seen as a key part of the solution, and they've been trialed and used in many places, as Natalie said, and Rob's colleagues at First Rail have been procuring trains with batteries in them. So it's definitely a key part of the solution for decarbonisation. A lot of the challenges that Rob mentioned as well around electricity supply and getting it in the right place, and changing depots and things, they all apply to rail as well. So I imagine that companies like First that deal with buses and rail are sort of sharing knowledge between the different modes. The next slide, please. Going on to infrastructure decarbonisation. One of the things that may be different in rail to other modes of transport is the amount of infrastructure required for rail. This means that the wide network that we have is maintained and renewed on a constant basis. A figure that always surprised me is that Network Rail replaces 500,000 sleepers per year. There's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of carbon emissions associated with that infrastructure and replacing it. So embodied carbon is potentially a bigger source of emissions than the traction energy. So the next slide, please. One of the key things that we work on with that is we have an existing tool called the Rail Carbon tool that enables calculation of embodied carbon emissions, and we're developing a replacement for that called the Carbon Management tool, which supports decision making. And as this this image shows, the opportunities for reducing carbon are much greater early in the design phase. So we're really trying to create a system where people think about what needs to be built. Obviously, the best way to reduce carbon is to not build something, if that can be achieved by a software change or something like that, rather than building a new track that has significant carbon savings. And the next slide, please. And the next one. This is the work that we've done on seamless journeys to decarbonise transport in general. As everyone's probably aware, domestic transport is the largest source of emissions, and lots of national and local plans talk about reducing car travel as being a key part of the country reaching net zero. Alongside that, I do have colleagues in the sustainability team that deal with social value, and providing better public transport provides great opportunities for people in terms of access to education and employment, and really helps to level up communities. There are lots of communities at risk of social exclusion because of transport issues. So seamless journeys and working with other modes of transport to create end-to-end journeys is a key part and has huge benefits. Next slide, please. So we produced a multimodal integration guidance for train operating companies recently. We worked with lots of other organisations from different modes of transport, like Sustrans, took guidance from Active Travel England, and other organisations like that. There were two key themes in terms of transport integration. One is place-based approach. Anyone developing plans need to consider where and why people are traveling, and develop it in accordance with the people in that area. There aren't any one-size-fits-all solutions. It all needs to be carefully considered. And the other one is collaboration. I'm relatively new to the rail industry. People have told me that there has been friction between bus and rail in terms of competing for passengers. That's definitely not a view that anyone should have. We should work together across industries and create door-to-door journeys that people can take easily. That means things like coordinating ticketing, coordinating timetables and stuff like that. The rail industry also collaborates quite a lot with the aviation industry. I know from previous work working on planning applications for airport expansion that one of the biggest issues is how people get to the airport. So creating new train lines like the Southern Rail link to Heathrow, which has been, I think, is part of the latest planning plans for Heathrow expansion. Things like that are crucial to enable people to get to the airport without driving. And I think that's yeah, there's just some examples of successful integration. Cambridge is well known for the station, or for cycling in general, and the station is very well integrated with that. There's 3,000 cycle parking spaces at the station. Manchester and the B network of integration of buses and transport is a great example of kind of replicating and spreading wider the integration that is available in London. And an example where I'm from, Southampton Central Station has improved massively recently with lots of better information of how people can get around the city and how it's integrated with the bus network. So yeah, we do need to work across transport, and that's a key part of decarbonising the country in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. Just one quick question.
Yep.
Talked about the costs of electrification. Are there any sort of programs ongoing to find ways to decrease the cost of electrification?
I don't know if there are programs, but I do know, again, from the Railways Industry Association that I mentioned earlier, that there's there had previously been about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, there were lots of challenges around electrification, and people were saying that it cost a lot more than it should do and projects were overrunning. But there are current projects that have been ongoing, like the Midland Main Line electrification. I think schemes have improved and there's a lot more knowledge about how to do things on good value. And I believe that scheme has been well delivered. And that is part of the challenge that's often discussed, because there isn't a sort of pipeline of electrification projects at the moment. So the people that have worked on those schemes and developed approaches that provide good value for money might not be able to move to the next scheme, because we're not sure what the next electrification scheme might be, which is a challenge for the network.
Yeah, common challenge.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, on to the last of our speakers this morning before we get to the question and answer session. Duncan McCourt, CEO for Sustainable Aviation. Over to you, Duncan.
Thanks. Good to see everyone. I'm Duncan McCourt. I'm the Chief Executive of Sustainable Aviation. Sustainable Aviation is a trade body that brings together all parts of the aviation industry, so the airlines, the airports, the manufacturers, air traffic control, and some of the others in the supply chain, such as some sustainable aviation fuel producers, all trying to make the industry more sustainable. Predominantly, that is reaching net zero carbon, but also dealing with some of the other environmental impact of aviation. I've got a few slides to run through, so Maxine, if you could bring those up. Thanks. Aviation's a difficult to decarbonise sector, possibly the most difficult to decarbonise, and as a result, it is likely to be the largest or second largest emitting sector of the UK, alongside agriculture, in the 2040s. That's going to be a pretty uncomfortable place, I think, for the industry to be. And it's incumbent on the aviation industry as a whole to show that it can and is decarbonising, which is what we are working on. There aren't, I think, that many opportunities for modal shift away from aviation. I think Natalie mentioned that idea earlier. Aviation delivers benefits that are pretty difficult, if not impossible, to get in in any other way. And the public in the UK show an increasing and ongoing demand for aviation. So it's up to us as an industry to show that we can and are decarbonising. And the next slide shows essentially what the industry's plan is. So this chart it shows how we can take that carbon out of flying. It's the product of all parts of the aviation industry coming together to work out what is likely to happen over the next 25 years with new aircraft, new technologies, new fuels, and therefore it becomes industry's plan for how we get to net zero. So the top line, you can just about make it out as yellow, shows carbon emissions if we do nothing. They would continue to grow over time as more people fly. The bottom line shows the emissions with all of the measures in this chart included, and it shows the industry reaching net zero in 2050. And if we were to forecast further out beyond the somewhat arbitrary deadline of 2050, the sector can possibly produce negative emissions. The coloured blocks that you see or the wedges show the contribution of each element. So the biggest one, the orange one there, shows the contribution from lower carbon sustainable aviation fuels. So we expect that to take about 40% of the carbon out by 2050. The blue blocks show the contribution of flying more efficient flight paths, that's through modernising airspace, through flying more efficient aircraft, using conventional fuel types, and through zero emission planes, including hydrogen. So that takes out the combination of those things gets you about three quarters of the way to net zero. The remaining quarter or so are a combination of removing from the atmosphere any carbon we're still producing. That's either through offsetting or through greenhouse gas removal, carbon capture and storage. That's the green chunks at the bottom. And the rest is from a slightly slower demand growth than otherwise would have occurred due to the increased ticket cost, reflecting the increased cost of decarbonising. And that's, as you can see, about 14%. So while the industry is expected to still grow and decarbonise, it will grow less rapidly than it otherwise would have. That's our forecast. The next slide just shows, it compares the sustainable aviation roadmap, which I've just shown you, with lots of others in lots of other geographies, lots of other models. Essentially, while the UK aviation industry was the first in the world to commit to net zero by 2050, many others have now followed, and there are a range of different roadmaps or different plans. The important thing is they all show essentially the same elements, but they show them in slightly different quantities that reflect either different geography or different assumptions. And importantly, the Committee on Climate Change also agree. They essentially see the same elements and see aviation as having a credible path to net zero. So the next slide just touches on what are the sort of challenges and opportunities coming. So the elements are there to decarbonise. The technology exists. It's largely proven, but it is not yet delivered at scale. And that's the big challenge. Airspace modernisation, this idea of allowing planes to fly more direct routes, is happening, but it's happening slowly, in part because it's complicated. If you think about the southeast of England, for example, lots of the flight paths of the various airports overlap. And if you change one set of flight paths, a set of homes that were once overflown may not be overflown, and a set of homes that were never overflown might become overflown, and they create political problems to deal with. So it is happening, but slowly, and the government has launched this design service, a single body, to unpick all of those complexities. Then there's getting enough sustainable aviation fuel produced. it's happening. There is a mandate in the UK now to for aircraft to use 2% currently of their fuel being sustainable aviation fuel. That will rise to 10% in 2030 and 22% in 2040, and is expected to go up from there. So that is making all aircraft that fly from the UK use sustainable aviation fuel. The challenge now is to have it produced at sufficient quantity and at a reasonable price. And the government is working on a financial support tool called the Revenue Certainty Mechanism, which is effectively modelled on contracts for difference used in offshore wind and others. So that is expected to help boost the production of UK SAF. It's also likely to be a global commodity, SAF, just as jet fuel is, so can also be imported. On hydrogen, that is happening, but it's happening probably more slowly than we thought it would 2 or 3 years ago. So alongside the technical challenge of using it on an aircraft, there is a broader set of challenges around the infrastructure to supply the quantities of hydrogen and to move it to and from and around an airport. And then lastly, the set of challenges around building a carbon capture and storage industry. So I don't think there is any path for aviation to net zero. I don't think there's any path for the world to net zero that doesn't include some elements of greenhouse gas removal, carbon capture and storage. And that is a nascent industry that needs building. Again, technologically, it is there, but it does not yet exist at anything like the scale needed. So we're looking at what can the aviation industry do to use its purchasing power, its forward purchasing power, to help boost that industry, to help give off-take agreements to get plants up and running. I just close with drawing out what I think are 3 cross-cutting issues that probably affect us all. The first is a lot of this relies on infrastructure that is not necessarily solely within each of our industries or each of our modes capacity. So there are broader economy or countrywide challenges around creating the infrastructure that's needed. The second, I think Ben mentioned it earlier, is an element of competition for resources. So lots of the sustainable fuels can be used in different modes. So the same feedstocks that can be used to produce sustainable aviation fuel can also be used for rail, could be used for road, heavy goods, etc., could be used potentially for maritime. And while each sector independently can come up with a model and a forecast that says, if it all comes to our sector, we can decarbonize, that's not how the world will work. So we have to a degree, be smart about how we allocate those resources. And either the market can do it through effectively pricing carbon or carbon reduction, or government can do it through allocation. I think I would favour the former. And the last one is the requirements for renewable electricity. So I think for all of the things that we've spoken about, certainly many of the things in the aviation space, it requires bluntly lashings of renewable electricity. And is the UK effectively producing enough of that? I think probably, and it will over time. And the development of offshore wind, for example, is a real, I think, success story for the UK. But in order to decarbonise, we will need more and more and more renewable electricity. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. And I think that last message that we all need to work together to address these issues, because they are all cross-cutting, is really the key issue. And thank you to all the speakers for your introductions there. We've got some questions coming in. I think the first question was particularly to Rob, but I think probably be useful for Natalie's view as well, as what are the solutions planned by First Bus to address the lack of charging infrastructure in rural areas in Scotland in particular? Sorry for my inability to read that in English there. Ben, Rob, what do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great question. And I think we all know that getting electric buses into rural parts of Scotland isn't going to be as straightforward as it is getting into the cities, which, as we can all understand, is mainly down to the charging infrastructure, I suppose, in those places. We are working on a few solutions to try and sort of help that, I suppose. We're teaming up with local councils, as I've said, Transport Scotland and other partners to look at of ways of bringing that infrastructure to the more remote areas. But it is important with those things to understand that with these isolated locations, it's not something we can kind of do alone. So I think I touched earlier on the collaboration and the focus on partnerships being key. We're looking at hub and spoke models. So basically having a main charging hub that we can support the services going out into the rural areas rather than needing separate charging points everywhere around, which is a much smarter way to get sort of additional coverage without necessarily needing to overbuild. Another part, I suppose, of the solutions is the buses themselves, invested in vehicles that have longer ranges, so they can handle sort of the longer rural routes without necessarily needing to charge mid-journey. And I suppose finally, we've been working on running some pilots to allow the public to charge in some secure areas of our depots. I think for Scotland specifically, Caledonia was part of our first charge rollout earlier on in the summer. Brought its own opportunities for the local area, so it made things easier, not just from a bus perspective, but from private and public transport as well. But it did bring its own challenges in terms of safety and security. So looking at all of these opportunities, I suppose, from different angles, will hopefully sort of help that future strategy when it comes to addressing and being able to get out to those rural communities nationwide. But yeah, it's all definitely part of our long-term strategy. How it pans out, there's so many different options at the moment, and we're I suppose we're dipping our toe into as many of those as possible to try and get it resolved. But I don't have a magic wand necessarily that can improve it. But yeah, it's work in progress. So just sort of watch this space with us.
Yeah, absolutely great. Thanks, Rob. Natalie, any thoughts you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So I'd suggest as well that we don't just have to look at electrification, that there are alternative fuels. Hydrogen particularly offers a solution, and not just for bus, but also for rail in areas where it will be difficult to electrify. Thinking of very steep-sided valleys in Wales. But yeah, hydrogen, as long as it's sort of green or blue hydrogen, which is more sustainable, there's really the opportunity to create sort of enterprise around that for Wales as well. So, but it could work just as well in Scotland as a location.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to put in anything, or should we move on to the next question? No, we'll crack on. It's a question to all panelists, which is interesting. Is there already an official effort, to your knowledge, to coordinate the maritime ports decarbonisation efforts with the ones in your area of operations? I think as well, my background is systems engineering. I tend to think of a port as a port, whether it's an airport or a maritime port or a train station. It's a place where you change mode. Tend to be places where you could make an energy hub, do the sort of things that Rob was talking about of providing energy to the community as well. So maybe we can take it from that point of view as well as directly from a maritime point of view. Ben, do you want to any thoughts?
Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts, and actually what you just said about the hubs reminded me of, there is a sort of hub concept of train stations in relation to charging as well as that, in terms of what Rob mentioned earlier, that could help in rural areas. I think train stations do make great hubs that lots of buses pass through them, so that's a good charging place. But in particular, in terms of maritime, two thoughts came to me. One of them, there is a government target for a 75% increase in rail freight. Working with ports is going to be a big part of that, to make sure that the freight can be moved from the port onto the rail network. So we as an industry will have to, or are engaging closely with ports to make sure that that rail freight increase can happen. The other thought that came to me is that we have had very good discussions with the Port of London Authority, and they're working on similar environmental issues to what we're doing. And we know that we had a very good discussion with them about using HVO, because we know that some of the boats that go up and down the Thames are fueled by HVO. So we had an interesting discussion with them about the experiences of different industries using HVO.
Great, thanks. And Duncan, got any thoughts you want to put in there?
Well, I would say, I think the question highlighted sort of official. I don't think there are huge conversations, frankly, between the airline or the aviation industry and the port community. There are some areas of crossover, so importing sustainable aviation fuel, for example, is one. But I don't think are taking place particularly at an industry level. That's down to the fuel supplier.
I think the East Midlands Airport is one of the free ports, though, isn't it, technically? So it's interesting crossover in terms of language.
Yeah.
Natalie?
So I haven't had much involvement in ports. We do have probably Holyhead is one of the key areas where we'd be looking to work in terms of that. We call them interchanges at the moment instead of hubs. But yeah, we have a few interchanges already in place in Wales. But yeah, that opportunity for that multimodal and building that relationship in terms of the decarbonisation, which yeah, we haven't been as involved in at the moment, or climate adaptation resilience, I'd say. So yeah, definitely something to work on going forward.
Great, thank you. And any thoughts, Rob?
I was just going to say, I'd sort of echo the point from earlier on. I think everybody's sort of touched on it in terms of the collaboration piece. I think there is so much more we can do and so much more crossover than maybe we fully appreciate at this stage. Everybody's going off and doing their own satellite things. But having events like this today and hopefully trying to just sort of tie some of these together, as Ben was saying, you know, there is a lot of crossover between rail, bus, etc. And Natalie touched on it as well. It's just, yeah, it's about exploiting these challenges and actually turn them into opportunities for everyone across the board, I suppose.
Great, thank you. The last question we've got at the moment, I don't know if anyone else wants to drop any in quickly, because we've about 5 minutes left. The last question we've got at the moment is for Duncan. SAFs and contracts for differences and the impact that might have on plane tickets. And it's quite a complicated calculation. I don't know if there's anything being looked at all, Duncan.
Thanks. So I think there's a couple of elements to it. Currently the plan for the revenue support mechanism, as it is known, which is similar to the contract for difference, is for the fuel supplier effectively to pay, and ultimately that gets passed to the airline, and ultimately that will get passed to the passenger, because perhaps against perceived wisdom, the margins in aviation or for airlines are not massive. So ultimately, the passenger will pay the cost, and the design of that system is still being worked through within government, with being some tension between fuel producers or potential fuel producers who would like that support to be as generous as possible, and the airlines who would like that would like to keep the impact on ticket prices as small as possible. So that tension is currently being sort of worked through and resolved within government, and the final design of the scheme is not yet out. On the broader question about the impact on ticket prices, there are a number of things that are likely to be more expensive for the aviation industry. So SAF, at least initially, is likely to be more expensive than jet fuel. Paying to remove the carbon and store it, the residual carbon and storage is an additional expense that isn't currently on the ticket price. So it seems likely that the price of a ticket will increase by a bit, but it is impossible to know at now how much that will be. As these industries scale up, they become considerably more efficient. And I mentioned the offshore wind industry before. That, I think, now is the cheapest form of electricity in the UK. So that shows that we can scale an industry from basically nothing to produce efficient an efficient outcome. So as I say, we don't know the final impact on ticket prices, but it seems there's a fair chance that they will increase by an amount, but we don't know about what that amount is.
Great, thank you. I guess there's also I've always felt that as things decarbonise in aviation, there might be people that are not flying because they don't want to be causing carbon pollution, and that as things decarbonise, there might be an increase in demand off the back of it. So who knows where it's going to go. Okay, we're now only just got a couple of minutes left, so I just want to say thank you again to all of our speakers and to the audience for their participation. And I think it's been a really interesting morning. I think that key message of we solve these problems by working together and working across modes. I think that collaboration is really the key message. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thank you.